Hi.
Hello.
Justin.
Hi, all.
Hey there.
Hello.
Hi.
I'll wait just another minute or so.
Judith, are you in the same time zone this time? We actually can't hear you.
Couldn't hear you.
Okay, now?
Yes.
Yes,
got it.
I am in the same time zone.
And hopefully this meeting won't go as long in any.
I'm counting on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're counting on you, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to the Portola Valley Planning Commission of July 20th, 2022. I think the first thing we'll do is take roll call.
Commissioner Haskell,
Present?
Commissioner Taylor,
Present.
Commissioner Targ, I do not see yet. Vice Chair Goulden,
Present.
Chair Koffstil.
And I'm here. Great, thanks. Great, so we usually open our meetings and allow some time for the public to make comments. This is on things that are not on the agenda, which is an item at 350 Grove and another one at 300 Alamos. So we have 4 attendees and I see one has their hand up. I'll call on Caroline Vertonghen. Are you there, Caroline?
I would note that Nicholas has joined while we're waiting for Caroline.
Okay, great. Caroline, are you there? Oh, I saw your unmute go off and on, but the mute's back on right now. Who on staff is controlling the audience? Is that is Caroline?
I am.
Hey, Caroline,
I just
can you
gave
talk
her
now?
the sign to unmute. So Caroline, on our side, you're unmuted. So you should be able to talk.
Hi, Caroline, we cannot hear you yet.
And she's muted again.
Go ahead, Caroline. Well, I come back to her, but we don't have any other speakers with their hand up, so
Oh, yes, we do.
We
Oh.
can give her a chance later in the meeting if you would like to. The chair has the discretion to do that for the oral communications.
We'll do that.
To log back in.
Okay, thanks. I see David Hexter's hand is up. Go ahead, David.
How's this?
Yes, good. We can hear you.
Good. Yes, I'm a geologist with Romig Engineers. I don't see any of the others from the applicant we're working with, Grove Drive or the Romig individuals. We were supposed to receive an email having us as panelists, and probably the others haven't received that either.
Oh, no.
So when we get to that item, we can just make sure we have everybody. I can promote everyone to panelists at that time. So it's not a problem. The emails went out, but every once in a while there's a glitch with the Zoom. So when we get to that item, we'll just take a moment and make sure everyone's here.
Fine. Do you have the others from the applicant?
Yes, we
Through the
do.
chair, do you want us to go ahead and do that now? Make sure we've got everyone present?
Yeah, I think so. Since if they're worried that they didn't get the emails, maybe we could scramble to get them the emails if needed. Yeah.
Okay, Jake, could you help me out here with who we're expecting?
Sure. On the applicant team side, we have Jonathan Phone, who is on the panelist, and we have David, who is an attendee and should be promoted at the time of the item.
Is that good, David?
Okay, so I'm bringing David over as a panelist right now. And it looks like Jonathan Phone has his hand up, so it looks like he's here.
Yeah, I'm here, guys.
Great. Okay, I see no other comments from the public, so we'll go ahead to the items. I presume staff will start us off with a report.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Gonna go ahead and share my screen real quick. Okay, great. Thank you, Chair. The item before you tonight is a request for consideration to approve a modification to the town's ground movement potential map at 350 Grove Drive. 350 Grove Drive is a 2.23 acre lot and is zoned residential estate. It is an irregular shaped lot located south of Grove Drive. The property is surrounded on all sides by single-family residential located in the same zoning district. The site has an average slope of 14%, and the western side of the property is located at the bottom of a slope. Corner Madera Creek roughly runs along the southeast and northeast side of the property. There's an existing residence located on a relatively flat portion of the site between the slope and creek setbacks. The applicant intends to demolish the existing single-family residence and is in early stages of planning for the construction of a new residence, ADU and site improvements. No plans for the development of the site have been submitted to the town, and any future development of a new residence would be reviewed by the ASCC for approval. The property owner proposes a modification to the town's ground movement potential map pursuant to the town's council resolution number 2746, 2017. The Planning Commission may, after recommendation from the town geologist, approve modifications to the town's ground movement potential maps if it determines that such modifications are warranted. The applicant has provided a geologic and geotechnical investigation as attached to the staff report, in which the project geotechnical engineer proposes to modify the geologic zone of which the site sits from a PD zone to a SUN zone along the west side of the property, as shown on your screen. The project engineer has visited the site and prepared a report and concluded that there is no risk of landsliding within the area indicated as PD. The project engineer further concludes that the PD zone, as currently delineated, is not an accurate location of the mapped ground movement potential zone. The town geologist has provided a peer review of the geologic and geotechnical investigation and is also attached to your staff report. And has generally agrees that the ground movement potential category does not accurately depict the site geologic conditions and that mapped PD zones should be eliminated. The northern portion of this contiguous PD zone was recently eliminated as it too was not reflective of the geologic site conditions. Staff sent a public notice to all property owners within 300 feet of the project site in advance of the Planning Commission meeting, and no public comments have been received by staff to date. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission consider the application, staff report, and public comment and adopt a resolution to approve the proposed map modifications. And this ends the staff presentation. Both the town geologist, John Wallace, and applicant team are available for any questions by the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Great. And our usual format then is to go around with the commissioners and ask questions of the staff of Jacob. And then we'll open it up for public comments and then come back to the commission for discussion. So do my fellow commissioners have questions for Jacob?
I do.
Go ahead, Judith.
There are several places in the presentation. The first one occurs on red page 12, where they talk about the effect of engineered designs and engineering solutions. And if someone could just give me a very high level description of what that's addressing. I don't think it's relevant here, but I want to understand why that disclosure is in here.
Don, if you could take that one.
Sure. Can you put that up on the screen, maybe? The exact, maybe Jacob?
Sure.
You're-
This is the, I'm sorry, red page 12?
Yeah, it's at the top. It flows throughout, and basically it's trying to say the map should not be changed since the maps are defined as reflecting undisturbed ground. And I think I just need an explanation for how that fits into what we're addressing today.
Okay. Let me share my screen again. One moment.
And Judith, I think what you're referring to is the original, what we call the original Resolution 500 that was drawn up. Yes. And it's referring to applications that might try to change the movement potential map with engineered structures. So if you're, for example, on a PD zone, which is defined as a potentially deep landslide feature, and it's a very restrictive category in town that we generally discourage or do not allow any structures to be built on those areas. In certain town categories, there is a clause where with engineered structures, and engineered structures, if that's your question, is for example, deep reinforced concrete piers that would extend down below the, for example, if it was a shallow landslide zone, you could stabilize that feature with engineered structures, thereby obviating the hazard that's defined by that movement potential category. That's what's being referred to in the resolution as engineered structures, some sort of either mechanically stabilized ground with piers, or sometimes we'll do it with removing the landslide material altogether and replacing it with engineered fill if the feature is shallow enough. And those are both termed engineered structures.
So the principle is just because you can address the PD risk, you can't fix the map. The map has to reflect the unengineered situation. Is that the principle?
Well, yeah, for example, if an engineered structure is put in place, say an engineered fill is implemented to replace a shallow landslide, we would change the movement potential map map category to show it as an engineered fill in that particular location. But other than that, I'm not sure what you're asking.
It does not apply here. Is that,
That's correct.
okay, that's what I need. That's all I need. Thank you.
Yeah, in this instance, and Jake, maybe you could put up the graphic that shows the movement potential category, the proposed change. Yeah, if you could zoom in on that. Yeah, for example, this happens to be an area, and we dealt with it on the, I believe it was the Holmes property. I want to say 214 Grove Drive, just at the very north end, right there. Yes. Maybe you could zoom in a little more. And this happens every now and then, where we find areas on the town map that were originally, you know, back in the 70s when these were originally developed, where the line work on the maps was not accurate at all. And we don't really catch them until a development comes in. You know, we don't scour these maps just looking for things that are out of whack. But every now and then we come across one, and this was a great example where the entire loop of Grove Drive was mismapped, and we addressed the northern portion of it when the Holmes application came in. And then now that this application has come in, it's given us a chance to kind of close the loop. But what looked like happened, the PD zone looks like it in the original line work got shifted toward the creek along this property, and it should have been, you know, it shouldn't have been there altogether. So it really wasn't a matter of having the consultant, you know, do some deep drilling. Typically a potentially deep zone requires a lot of deep drilling and mapping and other types of investigation to prove or disprove its existence. In this case, it's a really obvious mismapped area. That the red area in the PD was literally on perfectly flat ground. So it really was not a difficult map modification to deal with. And same with the Holmes area to the north.
Thank you.
Any more questions, Judith?
Nope.
Any other commissioners?
I was just going to follow up on that last piece. So that explains why that large red sort of, I won't say semicircle, but kind of horseshoe is all being removed because it's a mapping error, not because it was analyzed and found to be something different.
Yeah, actually, Jacob, sorry, if you could put it back up there. But in general, that's correct. When we first saw the Holmes application, if you notice to the left or southwest of the Holmes property at the very northern apex of Grove Drive, to the southwest or left of that, the red was exclusively on a town road. It wasn't on any private property. And so the town geologist made the command decision there, since it was not private property, let's get rid of that. It's absolutely not accurate. And then so we carried that around. The geologist for the Holmes property demonstrated with our concurrence that the red area on their property was inaccurate. And then extending down, it was partially on the town road. So we eliminated it to the next southward bend of Grove Drive. And then this application came in and kind of closed the loop on the southern end of it. So it's pretty clear and pretty obvious that we can eliminate that red boundary the whole way around.
Great, thank you.
Nicholas or John, do you have questions?
I have no questions.
No questions.
And I just wanted to follow up, John, did I understand you're going to just remove all this red? We won't make the other homeowners, if it touches a few of their properties, although maybe nobody wants to build a house on it, but you'll remove all this red?
Yeah, and that's a good point. At the very south end, it does nick, the very edge of another property,
Mhm,
but it's really in the middle of the creek.
mhm,
And it's really a moot point down there.
mhm.
It will never, whether it's there, whether it isn't there, it's not going to be an issue.
mhm.
And so since, 99% of it has already been kind of disproven, that little chunk across that property is not an issue. It's much easier just to eliminate it and go from there.
Okay. Great. If no other questions from my fellow commissioners, we'll go on to the public. If the public would like to make any comments or ask questions. And we have 8 attendees from the public right now, I think.
Through the chair, I didn't know if the applicant team wanted to say
Oh,
anything.
sorry. Very good.
We generally agree with what John Wallace has concurred with our findings. Most of the map is on flat ground, or we found shallow bedrock there, so we don't think that there's any deep, movement potential in that area.
Great, thank you. So I'm not seeing any questions from the public. Everybody knows they would raise their hand on Zoom if they would like to speak. Is that right? Okay.
There's one person on the phone, *9, if you're on the phone, to raise your hand.
Good. Okay. Oh, there I see it. Great. That helped. Laura, the person on the phone, raised their hand. So N7562, go ahead.
Caroline Vitanga.
Good
Is that
evening.
you, Caroline?
This is
Yeah.
Caroline Bertonga. Thank you. We had a lot of additions and remodels on that street. And I'm even thinking at the other end of Grove Drive, that big house on a steep hill. I was wondering, did that affect the decision-making from the Planning Commission or not? And my other question is, are we changing all the mapping in Portola Valley, or is this just particularly for this street or this area? Thank you.
Great. And we usually collect up all the questions and then have the staff or team answer them. So let me see, does anybody else from the public have a question or a comment? I don't see any, so we'll close that and let maybe Jacob answer that question.
Yeah, why don't I get started by saying, in the big picture, the Planning Commission looks at each project individually when we're looking at current planning applications. So it's different than advanced planning or policy making for the future. So the Planning Commission is required to look at each individual case and the merits of that case and see if it can make the findings or meet the criteria that's before it. So we don't consider other applications when we're looking at this one, unless there's a technical, aspect of it that has to do with property lines or safety or something like that. We evaluate them individually. In terms of the revisions to the map, this application this evening is for this specific revision to the map. So there would not be other changes to the map associated with this. And so these changes happen periodically when there's new evidence to support a change. And then every few years, there's usually one big update to the map, and that's led by the town geologist or staff. If there's anything that needs to be changed, generally that's not associated with a particular applicant. And so that happens every few years, and that's a separate process.
Great, thanks, Laura. Great, so I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. And I think what's on the table is a resolution to approve the proposed land designation. Anybody want to start? How about you, Craig?
I mean, I'm ready to make a motion. I mean, it seems reasonable to me. I understand what the geologist is saying, so it seems mostly like it's a mapping error more than it's a tough decision. So I'm ready to move on it.
Great. How about you, Nicholas?
Can't hear you, Nicholas.
Sorry, I'm willing to make a motion right now.
Okay, good. Let's go around just a little. How about you, Judith?
It makes sense. It's well explained. The applicant geologist did their analysis, the town geologist confirmed, so I'm comfortable.
Great. And John?
Yeah, I'm comfortable.
Yep, me too. The geologists agree and have an explanation is even bonus for that it looks like an error on the earlier map. Okay, great. I'll entertain a motion then.
I would make said motion. So I move that we move to approve. Let me see if I can get the exact wording here. Hang on a sec.
Adopt the resolution.
Adopt the resolution, yeah. Do we need any sort of specific language to go with it, or is it good enough just to?
You can just be adopt the resolution as drafted.
Yeah, so I move that we adopt the resolution as drafted for 350 Grove Drive.
Second,
Great. And now we don't have more comments from the public, right? We just, anything from ourselves? Okay.
But we do need a roll call vote
Sounds good.
for resolution.
Okay.
So Commissioner Haskell,
Aye.
Commissioner Targ,
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor,
Aye.
Vice Chair Golden,
aye.
Chair Koffstil.
Aye. Excellent. I think we're done with that item. So we'll go to item 2, which is, I think, 300 Alamos. And I presume we have an applicant or staff presentation on that to start with.
Yes, hello commissioners. I'm Ralph Robinson. I'm not sure I've had a chance yet to meet you on video or in person or anything, but good to be here. And
Welcome to
excited to-
Portola Valley Planning.
hey, thank you so much. Yes, I've been here a little while, but this is my first chance to get in front of Planning Commission, so looking forward to it. And then we have our applicant team. So I see Diane and Larry, and I know we also have Ron, Elizabeth on the call as well. Diane, not sure if there's anybody else from the applicant team we need to throw on here, but I think that's all of you all. And then I know one of our attendees, Dave Toole, he submitted public comments, so he may have a comment to make during this as well. But I will get going first with our staff presentation here.
And you also have the owner here as well tonight.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Bernard. Sorry, I don't know if you
No, that's
overlook you.
fine.
I love
That's all right.
Bernard. You're terrific. So,
I just pay for it.
of course, yeah, the reason we're here, of course. Okay, excellent. So what we have this evening is an architecture review and site development permit review for new main residence, garage, pool, and landscape improvements at 300 Alamos. So 300 Alamos, as you can see here, is located at the north side of Alamos Road. It's approximately 2.5 acre site that slopes downward towards Detalera Drive from the top of Alamos there. The site has an average slope of 18.7%. We're going to get into the implications of that slope in a little while here. So we have an existing one-story residence and detached garage that the applicant proposing to replace with a new single-story residence with a basement and detached garage. Application also includes a pool, new hardscaping, landscape improvements. Significant amount of the hardscaping is to accommodate changes to the driveway and auto court, which again, we'll get into a bit more detail here as well. So just to run through what we're looking at with the house here, here's our basement area. You're going to see a portion of this is daylit, so counted towards our overall floor area, which you'll also see in the elevations for the site as well. And here we see our main floor, just over 4,000 square feet, combined with our lower level and this attached carport. We have about a 5,200 square foot main residence, well below our 85% AMFA. And here's the layout for our detached garage, just over 1,800 square feet, combined with our main residence floor area. This puts the site below our AMFA requirements. So here's a view of the house. This is about the northwest corner looking up towards Alamos Road. So you see here that daylit portion of the basement, along with the proposed exterior materials, which we'll also run through in just a moment. The existing house, it's an increase in what is the existing house, but we are well below our vertical and maximum height limits for the district. And here are west and east views. So this kind of gives you an orientation of the location of the garage in relation to the main residence with the auto court in between, as well as, again, that sloping down portion towards the daylit portion of the basement. So our materials, so we have these porcelain panels of this iron color proposed for the roof, cement plaster and natural stone for the walls, which again, you can see in the elevations just a moment ago. All of the materials comply with the town's reflectivity and design guidelines. The applicant may speak on this a little more, but I believe their intention was to pick hardy materials that would, stand the test of time somewhat here, as well as blend into the natural look of the terrain. We also have proposed hardscape areas, much of this to accommodate the auto court and this hammerhead turnaround, as well as a new driveway and the pool. All the combined impervious surface areas are below our maximum allowed impervious surface total here. Also, just one quick note, all of these impervious surface areas are concentrated around the residence and within this already developed portion of the residence where we have an existing garage and single family home. Applicant is also proposing some new fencing around the property. So in the green, we see a 6-foot dog fence that encloses the rear of the property. Transitions to a 4-foot split rail fence around the auto court and front portions of the property. There was an initial comment during the ACC meeting regarding the amount of fencing. However, the 6-foot fencing is open to light and air, and the ACC found this fencing appropriate both for the intended use of allowing free range for the applicant's dogs, while also maintaining the natural terrain and egress for animals. Landscaping. Okay, so we have a significant amount of landscaping, including a high number of new trees being proposed here. Most of those you can see concentrated around the auto court and kind of to the right side of the residence here. Now, there was an initial comment from the Conservation Committee and the ACC regarding the orientation of the trees. So the applicant did, since the time of the ACC recommendation to approve this, they revised this landscape plan. So on the left side of the driveway, you can see the kind of clustering of the trees has been revised somewhat to make it less of a linear pattern, as well as on the right side of the driveway as well. Applicant might provide more details on that as well. Now, our water use, we're at 71% of our designated amount. The applicant, which again, can speak to more detail, is also proposing a retention tank. The idea being for that retention tank to hold essentially all the water that would be required for the landscaping, and they're anticipating hold more water than would actually be needed to support the landscaping here. And the plans proposed are primarily native species, have been revised through rounds of comments with Conservation Committee, with the applicant following those recommendations, again, to maintain mostly native species, as well as in the rear of the yard here, maintain mostly that native grass and that natural existing terrain as we see here. Now, there are a number of tree removals, 7 of which constitute significant trees. Now, many of these trees are to accommodate the new building, with a few trees recommended for removal by Conservation Committee because of potential fire impacts. Specifically, a couple of trees we're going to talk a little more about here. So here we have trees number 10 and 7. So these are on this kind of right side of the property facing 250 Alamos. These were slated for removal at the recommendation of staff and the Conservation Committee because of potential fire risk from these pine trees. The neighbor at 250 Alamos, Dave Toole, who is also on this call, submitted a letter requesting that the pine trees be kept in place as they provide shade for his property. And after discussing with Mr. Toole, I understand Bernard is now proposing to keep these trees. However, staff is going to stick with the Conservation Committee recommendation regarding the removal because of the potential fire risk. But I want to bring it to the Planning Commission's attention in case you have additional opinions or wish to opine on that a bit further. Now, what brings us to Planning Commission? So the site, the project is proposing a total of 3,575 square feet of soil movement, subject to the site development permit. Of course, that means that this application falls to the final decision of the Planning Commission. Now, there was significant conversation about the soil movement during the ACC meeting. I believe the applicant's going to discuss this in more detail, but the most significant reason for this amount of soil movement is because of the significant downslope on the property when you first come off of Alamos Road. For those who've been out to the site, you'll be immediately aware of what we're talking about here. The driveway orientation that's existing is not in compliance with the requirements of the fire district. So that slope of the driveway had to be reduced, as well as additional excavation done to accommodate the outer court and that hammerhead turnaround that we saw on the site plan earlier. The applicant, again, just in more detail, but long and short being that this high number of cut and fill is to accommodate that driveway and that new outer court, as well as provide an appropriate location for the buildings on a site, in a location where, again, we already have an existing residence in that garage. Now, also another additional item that came from the ACC conversation was suggesting the applicant kind of exhaust their options for reducing the amount of soil imported on the property. To that end, the applicant spoke to their excavator who'll be working on the project. He provided a letter saying that they anticipate having to import minimal amounts of soil because of the amount of excavation done for the piers and the other buildings on the property. But again, you may want to ask the applicant for a bit more detail to fill in there. We do not get exact numbers, kind of more of a broad overview of what they anticipate with the project there. Outdoor lighting. So this is another item where, again, after staff comments and after ACC review, the applicant has reduced the overall amount of lighting from what was initially proposed. So you still see we have a few fixtures here kind of leading down the driveway, which we've recommended reducing those, but the applicant wishes to keep in place for their safe access, walking their dogs at night in and out of the property. The number of fixtures around the auto court have been reduced since the time the ACC reviewed this project. So we see the 5 remaining ground mounted fixtures in the auto court area there. And then you see most of our outdoor lighting is concentrated in this kind of top left portion with the path lights in the garden, these ground mounted lights in the rear transitioning to these step lights in the pool area. All the lights are, the fixtures comply with our town standards. The ACC did comment on the amount of lighting and it was reduced from the time of that meeting, but again, you may wish to make additional requests for accommodation from the applicant here as well. Now, notice this meeting was mailed on July 8th, so property owners within 300 feet. Prior to that, we received the letter from Dave Toole at 250 Alamos, which is attachment 15, regarding those 2 pine trees that we discussed a little earlier. We've not received any additional comments since then. And prior to going to ACC, we also received a note from the Westridge Architectural Supervising Committee that they supported the project as constituted. So as I covered earlier, the ACC discussion principally focused on encouraging the applicant to reduce the amount of material imported for the grading. They also made some comments suggesting changing some of the orientation of the trees to make the plantings less linear, which the applicant has done since then, and also commented on suggesting the applicant reduce the amount of lighting, which has been done since the ACC meeting. But again, Planning Commission may wish to provide additional comment to that effect. And then one additional item for consideration with the Planning Commission. So the site, as noted here, is within the PS area. Resolution 2746/2017 requires the Planning Commission take into consideration the report from the town geologist regarding that designation. Now, the town geologist has approved the project with conditions, but I did want to bring this to your attention as required by that resolution. So after going through our staff review and AICC review, it is the recommendation of staff, the planning commission review this application and the staff report, offer feedback or potentially additional conditions of approval, and then approve the architecture review and site development permits for this project at 300 Alamos. So I am available for questions to the staff. And of course, we have Bernard, the homeowner, and the rest of the applicant team here on the call as well. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Ralph. Laura, is it suitable to have the applicant talk now?
Questions for staff would normally come first.
Okay, great. Okay, commissioners, do you have questions for Ralph? Go ahead, Craig.
Was there any information from Conservation Committee on sort of how flammable the trees are? I mean, I understand that it sounds like the neighbors would like to keep the trees. It sounds like the homeowner is willing to keep the trees with some trimming. So I guess I'm trying to get a little bit better handle on the fire risk. I mean, obviously pines are, you know, to some degree a fire risk, but we also have sort of, you know, neighborliness of, you know, trying to maintain in some sense what's there. So I guess I'm trying to balance those two off. Could you help me understand a little bit what those trade-offs are?
Yes, well, let me read off. So the exact comment from the Conservation Committee regarding tree 7, 8, and 10 that we saw in the image. So it mentions that these species have a very high pitch content and retain many dead branches as they age, presenting an extreme fire hazard almost year round. In combination, they act as ladder fuel, especially in a group such as this. Italian stone pines also tend to drop large branches from structural failure due to torsion. The Aleppo pine is shallow rooted and easily toppled in a windstorm. Yeah, so those were the overview as far as the pines. Now, I don't know if potentially removing one would, you know, reduce some of that risk, or as well as, you know, having some condition as far as the trimming of the trees. But again, not being an arborist myself, I can't opine too heavily on that, but I'm,
Right.
you know, yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions, Craig?
No, I'm good.
How about you, John?
No questions.
Nicholas? If you're talking, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I have my phone as well as my computer going. No, I have none.
Okay. Judith?
No, the presentation was good and it was very helpful to visit the site. So I have no further questions.
Ralph, my only question I couldn't quite follow. I know we do the cut and fill and we kind of add it. What's the net cut and fill?
Yes, so our, let's see, our net. Yeah, so we've got we've got 970 cut listed and 3350 fill listed. So we're talking about 2,400 in that range for the
There's a lot of
overall.
importing of dirt to the site.
Right, now that does not include what could potentially be done, or, you know, excavations, for example, the piers and some other items slated for the property, which they anticipate a high quantity of dirt from. So again, so far all I've got is kind of generalities as far as they don't anticipate importing much dirt, but again, that's something we could always condition or have them do a little more thinking on.
That's what I heard from the homeowner today when I went to
Yes.
visit, but yeah, your numbers look much higher than that.
Well, also the
and
excavator had a letter to, I think it was the excavator that had a letter sort of to the effect that by the time they did all the excavation, that they expected there to be very little import. Because our numbers in the town are literally cut and fill, and they're not like, every one of those piers that gets drilled is what, a couple of cubic yards. So, I mean, there's a significant amount of, you know, stuff that's going to be excavated that either they're going to take off site or they're going to use. And I think, you know, as we think about this, that's probably the critical thing, is to make sure they use everything they can to your point, is to minimize what comes in.
Okay.
Yeah, and as a reminder to the Planning Commission, we have a particular way that we measure the grading in the site development permit. And so that's the calculation that we have to read to you, even if they're reusing a lot of the soil from the excavations. So it's a particular way we evaluate it.
I see. So, if I cared about the number of truckloads going up and down the road, it's probably lower than the number that we traditionally use.
I think that that's accurate, and I think it would be good to have the applicant team weigh in on that as well when we get to that.
Okay, great. Is now time for the applicant team, or I go to public comments?
Applicant.
I'm sorry, if I may, on the question of cut and fill, I didn't see a discussion of whether the site has been previously modified or whether this is the first time that there's a substantial modification to the site. Could somebody weigh in on that?
Yes, I can provide my assumption as far as with the existing state of the driveway and the buildings that, when that was all done, there had to have been a significant amount of excavation done. Bernard, I know I think you've only owned the property for a few years, so I may not be aware of at the time the house was built. But certainly what's proposed is, fairly in keeping with kind of the existing orientation of the buildings, and again, with some modifications to make that driveway more appropriate for what's required by the fire district.
And I can weigh in on that too, if you'd like. After
Yes.
seeing the site, it was extensively graded for the initial development of that property, with a very large cut for the driveway garage area and a substantial amount of fill, up to 10 to 12 feet on the downslope side. And the proposed development is going to include very deep piers. These are going to be up to 30, 35 feet. So they'll be generating a very large amount of spoil from each one of those. It'll be in excess, each one, well, they're not all going to be 35 footers, but there will be some. So those are 5, 6, 7 cubic yard borings. And I don't have a site plan to know how many there'll be, but there'll be a lot of piers for this. The good news is these piers will be a much more stable configuration than what's out there. And when I was visiting the site, there are all kinds of evidence of downslope creep, settlement, movement, big cracks in the patios, in the retaining walls that are there. So this is going to be a huge improvement and a much more stable configuration.
Great, thanks,
Are
John.
we concerned about the stability of this location?
Well, I'm not at all with the deep pier supports. The way it is now, there's all kinds of what we call undocumented artificial fill that's up to 10 to 12 feet deep. And what we've learned in town, especially from 1998 El Nino, the deep undocumented fills were the ones that failed, and we documented about 6 or 7 of those in town that failed in 1998 catastrophically. So this is a site that would qualify, in my opinion, as a potential site for that if it wasn't, done properly, which everything that I've seen from the plans and the recommendations, will be deep supported with piers. So it's a much better situation.
Great, thanks, John. Anything else from commissioners? So we'll go on to the applicant, if the applicant would like to speak.
I think Ron Sutton is going to make the presentation. Are you there, Ron?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Yes, I'm Ron Sutton. I'm from Sutton Suzuki Architects. I'm representing Bernard and Jennifer on this project. We've designed this for them. They've been past clients, and this is great to work on another project for them. If we could pull up our drawings, I'm remote, really remote today, so I'm relying on other people to help with this. But when we started on this project, obviously it's a very steep downslope, and we did immediately do a geotechnical research of the project, and did discover that basically the site was cut from the top down, and basically dirt just pushed out to create a flat site, which was done at that time years ago without any compaction or soil prep underneath. And so we were aware that there was going to be, it was obvious out there that the site was, with the building movement, that it was done improperly. We've dealt with these sites before, and certainly with the technology we have with drilled piers, that all can be rectified. But also the soil is somewhat expansive, so that adds to the problems out there as far as wanting to use drilled piers versus standard footings, which could be a potential problem as well for movement. So the drilled piers was the obvious direction we would go with if this got approved for engineering. The original site, we actually were somewhat naive. We had not worked in Portola Valley before or worked with the fire district. We just assumed we'd be able to use the existing driveway, just fix it up a bit, and we'd be on our way. But we soon found out from the fire district the potential problems with the driveway. The first is as you enter from the roadway, the first turn is very downward steep, but it's also a very tight radius. We discovered from the city that, or from the fire district, that their minimum requirements, there's a 40-foot outside radius. This actually radius coming off the road is a little less than 30. And as it goes down, it creates, it gets steeper and steeper and extends over the slope requirements. So there's two things that added to redoing the driveway, which we had not anticipated. One was the radiuses themselves, which create a very different configuration, and then also the slope conditions of the driveway. So we basically, when we did our original design, had to go back to square one and take into consideration these radiuses. So on the drawing, you can see as you come off of Alamos Drive, the radius, the first 40-foot radius, which is quite substantial, and it pushes the initial entry driveway down the hill, which has already been cut. It was steeply cut to put the original driveway in. So basically the curve, the first curve, is up in the air in this case because of that cut, which then requires what we're talking about, this fill that has to be used to create a driveway to drive on versus a bridge or something else. So as that continues down again, and with the potential that we have to have less slope on the drive, we get a second radius, and that basically establishes a driveway. We did look at our other options, and we'll show you. One is we hoped that would work with the fire district was that the fire trucks could just drive down Alamos Drive and turn around in the cul-de-sac and come back the other direction, which would not require the first radius. They did not accept that. They said that would just take too much time and effort, and they weren't sure the cul-de-sac would be clear for turning. And so that option was thrown out very quickly. And we ended up with this option that basically established a driveway that we feel, no matter how this site is developed, whoever develops it, whatever, if Bernard didn't, if anybody else did, this is what you're going to have to deal with. And obviously there's cost involved here, which was not anticipated. Design issues were created that actually led to a solution that we thought was kind of actually helped resolve the issue. And so when we look at the driveway and what it takes to get down to the site, and we're not quite down, even at this, with the slope and the radiuses, we're not quite down to the level of the existing house. We're still a few feet above that. So what we saw was this hairpin going on in this area in the middle that we actually thought that we could use in a sense of putting the car structure there. And we backed it up right up to the front setback as far as we could, and use that area. And also what happens here is then on the initial hairpin, there was going to be a large retaining wall. We're actually using the back side of the garage now as a retaining wall by tucking it into the hillside. We bury the garage from the street side, view-wise, and use the wall of the garage, which is about retaining in some places as much as 8 to 9 feet. So it's been actually partially buried. So it gave us here a solution that actually we thought was quite creative for, one, reducing the mass of the garage, but also supporting the driveway. The issue with that, of course, is with your numbers, is we had to excavate a little bit for the garage, which then skews our numbers. But the excavation of digging out the garage actually adds dirt to our fill requirement that we need for the driveway. So the void of the garage and the dirt that we take out of the garage actually help again with the numbers, if you will, as how the city calculates square footage or cubic yards, I'm sorry. Once the driveway comes down, there's refinement requirements, and then we had to have the hammerhead because we're at a certain distance. But maybe we can go back one slide. Just we went one too many there. All right. By putting the garage here and having the driveway where it is, we almost were able to keep the house location, which is below the driveway, in pretty much the proximity of what has already been developed on the site. We know the idea here was to keep as much of the site undeveloped as possible in its natural state. As you can see from this, there's still a large portion of this site that still is undeveloped. And we've really concentrated our design more linear. The house itself going east to west, to keeping it up on the hill as far as possible and not interfere with the rest of the site as much as possible. We have pushed down a little bit, but every effort was made to keep the house up to the north as much as possible. This here is a cross section through the property from Alamos Drive on the left down through the site. And that shaded area, that tan, is where we're having to put in fill to meet the requirements for the driveway and for the outer court. So it's not a lot of fill in any one particular place. It's just all across the entire site, which is a long site. All right. Excuse me. This was the only other option that we saw, was to come in from the other end of the property. The issue here is that this is 6 feet higher than the other end of the property, so the driveway gets longer, creates more fill, more cut, more pavement. I'm losing my voice, I'm sorry. And creates more pavement. So this was quickly, it just didn't work. So based on the ASCC, that maybe there was a way we could reduce the grading, we engaged Oak Grove Construction, who is a grading contractor and civil engineer, to look at our design and see if there was anything we could do. This is where it was brought up that based on the geotechnical information that we had, our report, that with the drilled piers and with their experience with foundations and projects this size, that by the time we were able to figure in the foundations and drilled piers, they felt it would be fairly close to a balanced site. Again, this is based on past experience, what we know from the geotechnical report, size of piers, number of piers. It should be fairly accurate. It'll get modified, of course, if this gets approved and we bring on more information, more consultants. The other thing that should be noted, if we can go back to the plans, we had enough height on this property to actually put on a second floor, a partial second floor, which by doing so, would have made a great master bedroom suite. It would have had a fabulous view if we had put it up above. But in talking with neighbors and just the general thoughts, it was feeling that probably better not to build a second story, mass, bulk, those kinds of things. So the client decided that, the basement was a better option. There was a natural swale on the west side of the property. So it made sense to put the basement there. This is basically a walkout. So we chose that direction, and I think it was a plus for everybody, the neighbors, the design review process. The bulk of the building was reduced. But what happened here again is a plus and a minus. We were able to generate a certain amount of dirt, 600 cubic yards, that we can now use for fill. But again, it counts against us in the city's numbers because we're moving, anything that gets moved gets counted. But so we generated other dirt from the pool, other places as well. So I think all those things add to the balance of the site. Also, the water retention tanks. We're collecting all the water from the pervious surfaces and the roofs. There'll be an underground tank of about 120,000 gallons. With that generated dirt as well, you won't see it. It doesn't affect the site at all. It's just underground. So there's dirt generated from that, which is also a plus because the water should be enough to irrigate the plants. And so again, it's a plus system for water harvesting that Bernard has invested in. So I think that kind of goes through the process of how we got where we are. Again, trying to generate a site that we've focus on where it's already been developed and keep as much of it as open as possible and try to solve the problem with the driveway. And obviously it's generated a certain amount of earth movement that this site in particular requires. As far as we can see, I just don't see another solution at this point, or as we've looked through it, working on the project. So I can answer any questions on that. The other issue then would be the trees, and we've kind of went through that. Maybe we could just go to that and show where the trees are. Those that have been out to the site know where they are. So there are 3 trees there. The one is in red is just a vertical tree that's doing nothing. It's just a volunteer. That one would be removed. The other 2 trees, we originally showed them to be retained. The Conservation Commission recommended removal. So we did. Obviously, the neighbor, Dave, is wanting them to remain. And so that's kind of where we are with the trees, those Italian pines. So at least we know that's where they're at this point, the truth in plan. And then we have this, you've seen the picture from Ralph. We have it as well of where the trees we're talking about. The one in the middle is just a vertical pole, basically, that would get removed, and then 7 and 10 are the trees in question. If there's anything else we can discuss, as Ralph went through the fence issues and the lighting issues, which I think we've been resolved from us. So
I can add a few comments. One there. First of all, on the fill, there are. Last time I looked at the preliminary structural report, there are about 250 or so piers. So that will generate somewhere close to 1,000 cubic yard of fill. The water tank, the underground water cistern is 120 feet long by 9 feet deep by 18 feet wide. And that's another somewhere around 700 cubic yard of dirt. And then we have the grade beams and the wall foundation. So I think we are pretty close, if not a little bit higher than the 2,400 cubic yard of unbalanced fill. So bottom line, I think the Oak Grove analysis of not having to import or export fill plus or minus 100 yard or so either here or there is probably fairly accurate. So that would minimize the truck movement of moving fill in and out of the property. So that's that. As far as the trees are concerned, in the original submission, we had kept the trees, but we were asked to remove them by the Conservation Commission. So my take on that is that I would like to be sympathetic to the needs of a requirement of our neighbors. So I'm prepared to keep the trees after they have been trimmed and arranged so that they can survive. The two main trees, the third one, the small one, needs to go. That's very clear from everybody's viewpoint. If over time those trees were not going to survive, then we would have to take them out. But I'm be very willing to go and give it a try and see how they behave over time and see if we can keep them going so we can satisfy our neighbors' requirement. But if the town suggested that, told me that I had to take them down, I would take them down too. So I just stated my preference.
Great, thanks you all. Let me see if any commissioners have questions of the applicant team.
So I had one quick question.
Go
So
ahead, Tom.
can I assume that if those trees are removed, that there'll be some sort of new planting that goes in their place?
Yes, there are oak trees that would go in their place, but obviously they are smaller and they will take
They
longer.
would take time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Craig or Nicholas or Judith, do you have any questions for the applicant team?
No.
I do. For the cisterns that you're putting in, I mean, 120,000 gallons is a lot of water. What do you anticipate the cistern water being used for?
It would be two major usage. First of all, the irrigation. So we minimize the amount of water we have to draw from the town. The other usage is for fire protection. We are planning to install a fire sprinkler system all around the property, so that in case of fire hazard, we can turn it on, and the system has a fire retardant product that is added as it goes through the pump. So we would draw water from the water system first, and if not emptied out from the pool, and only in our last resort from the town.
Thank you.
Anything else, Craig?
I guess I can ask the question of the applicant, but we can certainly talk about it more in the discussion. I mean, being a longtime resident in the town, I really find that minimal lighting is best. I can appreciate you want enough lights on your driveway so you don't, trip. But I think I might ask you at least to reconsider the number of lights on the driveway, in the sense that if you are walking at night, keeping your night vision sort of intact is a good thing, and maybe a couple of less lights so that, because again, we're such a dark sky city that you really don't need much light to see where you're going. So I think when I looked at it, that was the one thing I was wondering is, I realized you reduced it down in the auto court, which is great. It still seemed like there were more than I would have imagined necessary given the night sky going down the driveway. And I guess I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
I certainly have no problem in reducing the lights. We have to balance the number. It's not so much for us and the dog walking, but it's for people who may be coming at night, and whether or not what kind of liability we incur if they don't see well enough to drive down. That applies to emergency vehicles, ambulances, repair people. I have no problem to
Delivery
reduce
people.
the number of lights. In fact, what I requested that we do is that those lights be activated manually with a timer to shut them off automatically if for some reason they are not turned off back manually. I do not want photo cells because I think they are wasteful in terms of energy and lighting up the sky and so forth. So that was the idea behind it. More a question of safety than anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And Judith or Nicholas, I didn't hear if you had questions.
I do not.
Nicholas?
I also have no questions.
Okay, and neither do I. So let's go on to comments from the public.
So if you could stop sharing your screen, please. Thank you.
And I see Karen's hand up.
Hi, this is Karen Batra, former member of the Wildfire Committee. I just wanted to speak to the commission and the applicant about the stone pines in particular. I'm the person who actually helped create the banning of the flammable 5 ordinance. And I actually used to have 2 stone pines, so I'm extremely familiar with these trees. The flammable 5 in general has an oil-based, resin-based sap, and so that's why they're so flammable versus oak trees have much more water in them. But what's really bad about the stone pines in particular is they create a huge amount of litter. And when I had fire professionals in my house, and I had 2 of them 30 feet away from my house, and in between those trees and the house was just gravel, they still highly suggested removing them. And in the case that I see on your property, it's worse because it just goes into the nature area and there isn't kind of an artificial barrier there. And unfortunately, trimming these trees doesn't really work very well because the bark itself is flammable. So if a fire approaches on the ground, the fire can actually go up the bark, kind of like a torch, which is kind of a scary analogy, but I do like to use that, versus an oak tree. It's very unlikely for the oak tree bark itself to inflame unless it's an extreme fire. So, and the amount of litter that comes off of these pine trees is pretty bad. So I just wanted to give some more context on that and encourage you to remove those and replace them with oak trees. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Any other public comments? And I see 8 attendees right now. Okay, I think we'll close the public part then and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Would anyone like to start? I'll pick Nicholas to start then. I think we don't hear you. Nicholas, we don't hear you yet.
How about now?
Yes.
Yeah, so it seems like it's a thoughtful use of the site. The site's been previously carved up. The approach that's being taken now sounds like it is a more secure, from a geological standpoint, use of the site. It's also a more protective use of the site, given the modifications to the driveway. Certainly the exterior skin of the building from a fire standpoint seems superior. A lot of thought appears to have gone into it. Whereas I think that there's good reason for us to be concerned both about cut as well as fill. And the issue there is soil disturbance in and of itself, and modification of hillsides, and making sure that to the extent possible that the structures are subservient to nature, and also the use of or the generation of fill placed on open ground promotes invasive species, ruderal vegetation as well. So the issue cuts both from a number of vehicles and the aesthetics of the property, as well as invasives here, because the soil is being reused in a particular way for the benefit of the property. I don't think that those concerns are really raised. In terms of the trees, my thought is that both from a applicant standpoint and from a fire safety standpoint and maintenance of the native veg, it probably makes sense to remove them and to replace them with a larger rather than smaller replacement oak tree. It does seem like there's an awful lot of light. Putting on a timer certainly mitigates things. Having a closer look and following the direction of the ASCC on the lighting, and I believe this was Commissioner Taylor's point, would make sense to me as well. Having said all of that, it's again, I think a thoughtful use of the property, probably a restorative use of the property, and a safer use of the property than what's presently in place.
Great, thanks, Nicholas. John, how about you next?
Yeah, so I looked at this from the perspective of yet another sort of how are our trade-offs changing over time? And this one, clearly, we've seen more interest in fire safety, justifiably so, given California or our changing climate. So it needs a driveway that can be accommodated with the current requirements. And yeah, it does, that does require some more cut and fill, but I think it's the right trade-off to make in this case. With respect to the trees, so in terms of the lighting and all of that, I trust the ASCC on that, and I know there were requirements on the timers and all of that, so I think that stuff's fine. With respect to the trees, I actually don't really want to get in the middle of that, in that I don't know that we need to become the reviewing organization for recommendations from the Conservation Committee without us having to then have a whole lot more education in that area. I don't necessarily have a problem with the trees staying there if people thought that was okay. From the perspective of the Planning Commission, I think we're supposed to look at the cut and fill perspective, and I'd be in favor of just moving forward without trying to tell them which way to go on the trees. And if the Conservation Committee is willing to come back and say, it's okay. But my expectation is that they won't, and that we probably need to take that we'll move forward with this, with the trees being replaced. And I sympathize with the neighbor completely on that. But it's just, the fire danger keeps going up, and doing what we can to mitigate that moving forward. I expect to see both these issues, having to reconfigure the lots based on the requirements for fire needs and trees, asking them to be removed. You know, compared to our longtime history of trying to save all the trees, now I think we're going to be moving in the direction of removing a lot of them. So I think that ends up making a lot of sense. Sorry, I might have repeated myself at the end there, but
Let's see, Craig.
So overall, I kind of agree with Nick. I mean, I think it's a thoughtful project. I really appreciate the sort of water use aspects of it. I think it's pretty creative. So I like all those pieces. The cut and fill, I guess what I'd like to see is that we put some condition on this, that after they get their building plan so they can calculate an exact number, that as long as it's within a certain number of cubic feet, 100 cubic feet, 300, I mean, I think I defer to Laura to help me understand what that number should be. If it were larger than that, then I think it should come back to us for discussion. But generally, I think what I heard was that the cut and fill is going to be used not only on the site, but sort of underneath the building and the driveway. So it's not even going to be, you know, on the site sort of in a, you know, in a landscaping. It's most of it's actually going to get covered up. So overall, I'm pretty comfortable with the cut and fill, but I'd like to put some kind of bounds on that just to make sure that it's sort of followed through. The driveway lights, it's my understanding that they're proposing more than ASCC was recommending. So I would really like to encourage fewer. I'm on board with safety, but I think people always think they need a lot more lights than you do to see your way down a driveway, especially if you're coming in a car where you have, you know, huge headlamps. So understanding, you know, where the corners are and make sure, you know, you get around the corners makes sense to me. But it does seem to me there could be fewer lights than are on the plan. And I think that's what ASCC asked for. So I'd be, you know, on board with that. In terms of the trees, Jonathan, I don't think this goes back to the Conservation Committee. We are the roll-up. I mean, we're the they've given us their opinion. It's up to us to make that final recommendation. And I think with that, I'm with you in the sense, I don't think we should be trying to second guess the Conservation Committee. So I'm very appreciative that the applicant has worked with the neighbors and is willing to try to cooperate with the neighbors. But, you know, given that we're talking about an extremely flammable tree and given the wildfire safety issues, I think we should just continue the Conservation Committee's recommendation to have them take them out. I realize that's tough for the neighbor because I mean, I went on site and they're not going to put in a big enough oak tree to make up for it because it's not a sightline thing. It's literally, he likes that it shades their house, and it shades their house because they're like 100 feet tall. So, I mean, I don't think there's going to be a replacement for that. And I appreciate that. And I guess, like I said, I appreciate the applicant was working with their neighbors. I think, you know, good neighborly behavior. But I do think in this case, we probably ought to stay with the Conservation Committee's recommendation. So I think that's what I got.
Great, thanks. Judith?
Sure. The site was previously disturbed, and the rationale for why we're talking about a lot of cut and fill is largely derived from fire-related, fire truck, fire department related requests. There are some attributes of how that's being implemented that I think are thoughtful in trying to minimize travel onto and off of the site. And so I encourage as much of that as possible. It did seem like in theory it should work just fine, and it will be a safer site as a result of all of that. So I'm okay with the cut and fill, and whether we have a a defined amount of cut and fill that it can't exceed without coming back. I'm not as concerned about that, but I'd be open to it if the rest of the commissioners felt that were necessary. On the lighting, I could go either way. I think if the applicant has timed lights and has a system where that can be minimized, that could work. I think if you had less but more strategically placed to achieve the safety objectives, that could work. So I do not feel strongly about that. I think either way could work. And, I will say there's a lot of trees being removed from that site in order to accommodate the ingress and egress for the fire vehicles. So, myself, I think the Conservation Committee made very good informed comments. I think they are being very vigilant about making sure people are aware of the risks of these trees. But I personally would let the neighbors work it out between themselves. At a minimum, there's going to be a lot of tree trimming. There may be, assessments of the trees as that happens that inform the applicants and their neighbors. And I do think that, the fact that the neighbors are cooperating, I really want to encourage. So I would not mandate that. I would personally, and I know I'm in the minority here, ask that they proceed giving very full consideration of the comments made and see how their trimming went if they were to go that route. But I know I'm in the minority. So that's what I got.
Great, thanks, Judith. And for me, I also agree the rationale for the cut and fill is great. The reason these high cut and fill come to the Planning Commission is we really want to make sure people aren't just chopping off hills and filling up valleys, but I don't think that's the case here. I'm sympathetic to how hard the fire department driveway and turnaround requirements are. So I'm okay with that, and I don't need it to come back to us later. I'm happy that the architect and the owner are trying to use the material the best way possible on the site and not have truck trips more than needed. I'm in favor of less lighting, but again, I'll leave that up to if the ASPC approved it, then it's okay. I'm glad there's timers. And the trees also, I'm with Judith on letting the neighbors work it out. I think my thought I'd like to put in is really just as a neighbor, I am amazed at the number of pine trees that I have seen dying in our neighborhoods, Portola Valley, in the last 2 years. I feel like every week I see a new tree that's starting to turn brown, and they go crispy, crunchy brown in just 3 months. I'm just amazed. And then of course everybody's, oh my gosh, that tree has to come out, that tree has to come out. It turns into a big thing. So I feel like if I were the owner, the neighbor, I'd really want to take out those trees now and get started on the new trees growing. I agree. You never get oak trees up like the pine trees. But I kind of think that looks better in Portola Valley, just the lower, in my neighborhood, definitely the height of the trees has come down because of the pine trees that have had to be taken out. So that's my 2 cents on it. Okay, I think that's everybody. Shall we move to, I do see one hand that was up for a while and then was not up in our public comment. I think I'll go ahead. This is Sue Chapu. I see your hand up. Is there something that you like to say?
Yeah, this is Gene Chapu. Having lived in Portola Valley for over 50 years, at this place on Alamos for 50. First of all, I'd like to say I was not noticed. I'm at 358 Alamos. I know there's a 300-foot notification, but I was noticed when they built the house on Ash Lane. And apparently my property touches their property or is within that limit. But I talked to the town, I talked to Cheyenne Brown. She assured me I would be notified. We were out of town. I just happened to look at my phone because I put it in. I had to call a neighbor, excuse me, to get the Zoom call. And I'm disappointed. I wasn't noticed. Fully a quarter of my wife's life and my life has been spent with construction on Alamos Road. At least 20 to 25 years, nonstop. I'm 80 years old. I don't want to deny somebody building a house, but my God, the safety element, when one house was built, I don't know, around the corner, there were 40 to 50 vehicles a day there. Lots of them without current registrations, which suggests no insurance. Problem with the fire department trying to get by. So my question, one of my questions is, where the construction, how long is the proposed construction time for this? Where are the construction vehicles going to be parked? Will we get noticed? The last house that was built on the street, I had 6 flat tires. I had to threaten to take the contractor to court. I'm getting tired of all of this. It's a real imposition on the neighbors. Sorry, Bernard, I'm a Frenchman also. Anyway, my question is, where are you going to park all the vehicles? What's the construction time? I calculated with one house on our street, had they parked at a remote location, Ford Field, the town would have saved 50,000 gallons of gasoline. So much for a green town. So anyway, those are my primary questions. I know you talked about the seismic. I know the house next door at 330 was upgrading stables for residents for living quarters, and their geotech changed the geology. But as far as I know, it's still what? Moving shallow landslides. Anyway, I'd like some answers if possible.
So let me answer the question about the parking of the vehicle.
Bernard, could we, we're doing this,
I'm sorry, you tell me what to do.
yeah, thanks. We're doing this way out of order. Normally we ask for the public comments before the commission states their results. And so this is, I thought I would just be friendly and take the comments. Now I see another public comment, so I'm going to take that. But then we can also let the staff answer some of these questions that people are posing. So can we go to Dave Toole on the, who has his hand up?
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I didn't know the sequence of your process, so I would have spoken earlier. You know, the pine trees, I appreciate the perspective that they are flammable. That is a concern. On the other hand, we built our house with a patio located where the shade was. And the oak tree planting would not help accommodate it. And I would encourage the Planning Commission to give Bernard and us the latitude to work through configuring the trees while considering the potential flammability. And if it ends up that we decide to take them out, we will. But I'd like to work through that with Bernard and not hold up the property. I love what he's doing. It's going to be a great addition to the neighborhood.
Great. Great. Laura, how do you recommend we answer the question from Jean? Shall staff try to answer that, or go to the applicant?
Let me start with a big picture answer, and then maybe the applicant can supply some more details on what they have planned so far for construction. We do require construction staging plans along with the construction drawings, and we do review them. But the things that we're reviewing for are things like not having structures or trailers within setbacks, not parking or staging underneath tree canopies where we may damage trees, tree protection, erosion control. Those are the types of things that we're focused on. We look when there's places where there's trails to alert people to trails so they're not parking on trails. But it doesn't always address kind of that, just the back and forth action associated with construction. Because of basic property rights that people have to improve their properties, we, the town, can't really control or suggest timing to people of when they wish to work on their individual single-family homes. And because of the nature of the housing stock in the community now becoming older, because of when a lot of these original houses were built, we do see a lot of those older houses being replaced because the life cycle of those houses has ended. So it is true and unfortunate that many of our residents have been impacted by a lot of construction due to those factors. But there's not a lot that the town can do in response in terms of the big picture. In terms of kind of the details of construction staging on any additional street, we do look to the applicant to be thoughtful, to be creative, to give notice of phone numbers of construction superintendents and people like that and foremen to neighbors so that issues that come up can be discussed amongst neighbors. And so that's the strong recommendation. And then if we receive complaints along the way, we do send our building inspector out if we have active complaints on active job sites to talk to people and make sure that people are in compliance with our noise regulations in particular. So those are some of the big picture things, but I think it would be useful if the applicant has started thinking about it yet, about what that construction staging might include.
All right, let me try to address that question. Actually, the question of parking was raised by the Westridge Homeowner Association. And it turns out that we have a good, what I think is a good plan for that. The auto court, the current and the planned one, is a natural place to park vehicles. And so we're planning to use that to park as many vehicles off-road as possible, as well as using the flat area where the current garage that's going to be demolished is. That's another area where parking will be available for construction trucks. I cannot guarantee there will never be anyone on the street, but there are, those two areas are large areas which will accommodate a significant number of trucks that will be parked off-site, off the road, I should say.
Great, thanks, Bernard.
Can I say something here as the contractor that might answer a lot of the concerns?
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Go ahead.
Okay, so first let me tell you a little bit about who we are. We're a construction company that Bernard has opted to work with on this project. Our main office is in Belvedere, California. And I don't know how many of you folks know Belvedere, but it is a very small community with very narrow roads. Most of them are one-lane roads. And the limits and restrictions of construction in Belvedere are excessive. But this is our 74th year of being in business. And so we're used to working in this kind of climate. Our normal operation is the first thing that we do is the project manager and the foreman will knock on all the immediate neighbor doors. And most likely in this case, it will be the entire street. We'll hand them a letter that basically describes who each player is. We're the contractor, here's our address. Here is the order in which to call if you have any concerns, starting with the project manager all the way down the list to it ends up with me at the end. I'm the bottom guy. We also have on that letter, if any neighbors are ever planning any sort of a party, because we're very used to clients or neighbors having fundraisers and big events on their properties. So we actually reach out to the neighbors and say, if you have anything planned, please give us advance notice. And we'll do our best to plan around it so that we don't have concrete trucks coming up the day of your party. So we like to think that when the job's done, we haven't upset the relationship with our client and all of his new neighbors. As far as trucks and vehicles onto the property, we have a shuttle van. We own 2 of them. We will be shuttling our people from a designated spot somewhere down below, a ride share areas. We haven't located that yet, but we will be doing that. Our subcontractors are required to have job boxes on site so that they also have to shuttle their people to the job sites. We don't want them saying, well, I've got to come up with a load of lumber today, or I'm sorry, a load of wire, a load of pipe, whatever. We tell them you need to have that stuff all delivered to the job, staged on the job. So the only thing that's coming in on a daily basis are your people. And then what Bernard also just said is this site is a golden opportunity for offsite staging. One of the first things to go in will be that driveway and that hammerhead and some of the grading for the garage, which creates a very large off-street staging. And I'm going to back up what Bernard also said. I cannot guarantee that there will never be any construction vehicle parked on the street. At times, there probably will be something up there. PG&E may show up and they think it's part of our job site, but we will do everything we can to keep off the street and minimize the impact to the neighborhood. As far as the duration, how long is this project going to take? That one is still a little hard question to answer because the drawings have not been 100% complete. They're not quite at a state yet where we can get definitive scheduling from subcontractors, and it's all based on whether it gets approved tonight or not. And it's my understanding with the team here that if it does get approved tonight, we're moved steaming forward ahead, drawings will be completed. Then we will be able to have a better idea on timing, and obviously a much better idea on the dirt quantities. And that's where I'll finish at, is we have spent extensive time working with the grading contractor. And this is a grading contractor I work with exclusively to do what we can to minimize the street traffic. Because once again, I'm very aware of working in this kind of community. And the last thing I want to see is a bunch of dump trucks going up and down the street. So we feel that with those tanks that are the tank, originally it was going to be tanks. It's one large tank now instead of 3 tanks, same capacity. But the dirt that's going to come out of that tank and the dirt that's going to come out of the anticipated drilled piers is, and also the dirt that's going to come out of the wall behind the garage, is going to give us a balanced site. So I'm very confident that we can do, and I will commit that we will do everything we can to keep the truck trips off the street as much as possible.
Great, thanks, Larry. That was very helpful. Commissioners, I feel like we got new info. Maybe people want to give more comments. I could allow time for that. Do you have anything else you want to say? Or do your previous comments sort of stand and cover things?
So,
go ahead, Craig.
The only thing I would add is, Laura, I hope you'll take Jean's comment about not getting noticed. I'm not sure what happened, but we don't need to answer it tonight, but just I hope somebody follows up with Jean on kind of what happened. I mean, whether he's out of the 300 feet or he missed the notice, but it seemed like it'd be worth following up just as sort of a good neighborhood policy for us.
It does look to us like it's outside of 300 feet.
Okay.
It looks to me like it's just about 400 feet away is what it looks like to me.
Okay, so Jean just thinks he was within the radius. So, okay, just as long as he knows why he didn't get noticed, I think that's what's important. I just don't want a resident to feel like he was intentionally left out somehow.
No, and I can understand if there was, confusion. If Cheyenne from our team assumed that he was within the 300-foot notice, that may have been our mistake to imply that he was within the noticing area when he wasn't.
Yeah.
So that really could be our responsibility.
Okay.
Anybody else want to comment? Was that John? Did I hear you?
Yeah. So I was going to say, so I don't feel the need to, especially with the additional information, to double check on the cut and fill at some future. I don't think we need a checkpoint there, because aside from the fact that I think they're doing a good job on it, I think we'd end up approving it anyway, because they're going to need that driveway. So, and I wouldn't see us stopping it at that point. And I do kind of like the idea of letting the neighbors decide on the trees based on some of the comments. I did note in, I guess it was the letter from the neighbor, that he wasn't sure who to escalate it to. And that was part of why I was thinking maybe they hadn't gone back to the Conservation Committee, which is normally people have a concern, it circles back through the committee. So, but I could certainly go along. I think my initial was I could go either way on that one, and whichever way moves the project forward is kind of where I am at the moment.
Great, thanks.
So can I add on to that piece, just because we're talking about the cut and fill?
Yeah.
I think there's a little confusion in what I was suggesting. What I'd like to do is put a bound on this, that they didn't end up trucking it all out and then bringing a bunch back in. I don't want it to come back here unless the plan changes. And I'm happy to just say, as long as there's not more than 400 cubic yards or whatever the number, and Laura, I need your help here, but whatever the right number is, doesn't move on and off the property, then it doesn't come back to us. I just want to make sure that there's enough motion here. If they decided to take all of the pier leftovers and haul them off site, and then haul all the stuff in. I mean, that wouldn't meet the spirit of what we're talking about. So I was just looking to put a bound around that. The plan I hear everybody saying sounds exactly right to me. I just want something that sort of, secures it as a condition so that it just follow through. And Larry, I totally appreciate what you're saying. You seem like you've got a great handle on how to build in sensitive neighborhoods.
Great. Do we want to
Yes,
make?
thank you for saying that. I'm sorry I had to unmute there, but we are definitely sensitive to this kind of climate and neighborhood. So thank you.
Yeah.
So Laura, you're looking, or staff, you're looking for us for a resolution to approve the cut and fill, basically, is that right?
Yeah, it's officially for the whole project. So you are the decision-making body for the whole project, including all of the elements of it. And so from the things that you've been talking about, I think we just need to capture within a motion, the things that you feel like do need to be changed from the conditions of approval or the plans that they are. So for example, related to the grading, related to Craig's comment, that we could, create a condition of approval that's something like, there is the planning commission expects, the majority of the soil to be reused on site and not have significant import or export. And you can leave something to the planning director's discretion if you feel comfortable with that, or we could work with Larry to try to develop a numeric standard if you feel like that was warranted, so that would trigger additional review. But I think your intent that the soil stay on site and not be taken off and new soil taken on is a good one. There are occasionally circumstances where that has to happen because of what they find when they get in there, but we don't think that will be the case here based on all the experts' opinion. So I think it's just a matter of making sure we verify that step when we review the building permit plans, that the plans that what they've described to us tonight will be what they end up doing. That's the way I'm understanding it.
Okay, sounds good. Does somebody want to take a stab at the motion? I think we're looking at something that's approving the plan with, I'd go for the intent being to keep most of the soil, not to have a huge number of trips, but up to the planning director's discretion.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that for the cut and fill. I'm less comfortable with the tree question, so I don't know if we want to make it a separate part of this. I'm really sympathetic to the neighbor. I mean, I'm about relationships between neighbors, so this is a tough one for me. And if it wasn't stone pine with the sort of oily bark, this would be an easy decision for me to leave it to the neighbors. But the problem with wildfires, I mean, if those things take off and they're embers and they're spewing embers on houses that are, a block away, then this really isn't kind of between those two neighbors. This is sort of within the larger Portola neighborhood. So the trees are a harder issue for me. The rest of it all, I'm pretty comfortable. I mean, I think we got a reputable contractor involved here. We've got a homeowner who's clearly wants to build a great and thoughtful project. So I'm good with the rest of it. So I don't know if we want to separate out the trees so we can vote differently on it. Because I think I would have to vote against the trees now. And this pains me because normally I love the fact that the neighbors are trying to work together, but in this case, these strike me as pretty dangerous trees. These are kind of like leaving eucalyptus trees, which we've been real clear over the last 10 years that you cut them down. So I don't know how you guys want to deal with it, but that's my one piece of discomfort that's left.
Right, and how about the lighting? Are we going to leave the lighting with the previous kind of approval from the ASCC?
Yeah, it was my understanding that ASCC asked for less, and I don't know if they reduced them in the driveway, but but I'm okay. I mean, I think the owner's got a plan and, you know, I'd ask them to review the plan again to see if they can maybe reduce it a little bit more, but I don't feel like I need a condition on that. I'm willing to say if it's, you know, on a timer and it's a manual switch and it's what it is or less, then I'm good with that. So that doesn't feel to me like it needs special treatment.
Okay, maybe we should have one resolution that's the main project, including the lighting. And then I think we're all going to be in favor of that. And then a separate one for the, whether the trees need to be removed. But I think I heard John, Judith and I say we'd leave it to the neighbors. You want to say they have to come down, and I'm not sure what Nicholas thought.
Well, and to be clear, I was suggesting that we follow the Conservation Committee's recommendation, not my personal opinion.
Right. Okay.
So just doing the math, I think that there's a resolution that can pass. I would do it as one resolution. Lights.
I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, I think that the lights are, as I understand it, we're moving with the ASCC proposal.
Yeah.
No? Yes.
The ASCC requested a reduction in the lighting, and my understanding is they did reduce the lights. Is that correct, Ralph?
Yes.
And Ralph, did they?
And the lighting and the balance is going to be on timer, as I think is required. No?
Yeah, on the driveway, in particular, where the discussion is, yes. It would be,
All right,
it would need to
so-
have an auto shut off system, so it couldn't be left on all night, for example.
I think there's like a 15-minute and there's a auto shut off unless it's overridden. Is my. So I think we actually have it, and I think that if I'm counting noses right, I would put forward, or why not? I'd put forward a resolution that would include the following elements, and if the planning director can frame it better, I would appreciate it. But the cut and fill is as should be a balanced, or that it will be balanced with modification to be left to the discretion of the planning director. The lighting is fine, as is consistent with the recommendations of the ASCC. I'm counting at least 3, so I'm just going to do it with the neighbors to determine the nature of the trees as they see fit. Would be, and I would welcome any friendly amendment as I'm trying to move this along and count noses as we have here.
So on the friendly amendment side, I would like to leave it to the neighbors with the Conservation Committee. Because I think they have valuable information that could sway folks, that could sway the two neighbors also, in terms of the amount of danger that we're talking about there, the potential danger, as Craig mentions, to the neighborhood overall.
So it's a meet and confer decision left to the neighbors with the advice of the Conservation Committee. but the ultimate decision is between the neighbors.
Yeah, that's what I
I'm
understood.
looking, John, I'm looking for an affirmation from you to make sure that we got it right.
Yeah, that's good. I'm still struggling with the whole fire as a whole, and you know, if I felt like I knew that if we really have, because I have not seen this particularly come up before in our planning commission discussions, if we really have been saying eucalyptus tree, take it down no matter what, then I'd be tempted to say, well, is this really any different? But I don't know that we have, I just don't know enough to swing that in my own mind. But sorry, and I'm dithering here because I'm not sure what to do.
No,
on
John,
the
please do this. You're the swing vote. And I don't like the trees. I think that they're a menace and they should come down. I'm trying to be mindful of three people here, and I will go with at least the plurality. So if you don't like it, you've got to. No, that's wrong, Nicholas. You've misheard me.
You're right. I am going to vote to remove the trees.
Okay.
So
amended. Friendly amendment accepted. We're now removing the trees.
Yes.
So there's a motion, and we need to see if there's a second.
Motion. Yes, that's my motion.
I would second that.
So could you read me the motion now? Because I think I somewhere lost. I thought I understood where it was going, and it seems the last minute made it sort of hard left. So
it did.
Okay, so can you read me the motion? Because at some point we'll get into the discussion, and then we can go from there. But
it's a balanced cut and fill with modification of the discretion of the planning director.
Yep.
It is moving forward with the lighting plan as it is, and it's a removal of the little grouping of trees.
I second that.
Thank you.
So I don't know if I can comment. I support this project. I do not feel that we have enough information on the trees, so I would not support that resolution, but I fully support the project otherwise.
So then through the chair, I would recommend that we take a vote on this particular motion. And if this motion does not pass, then we can consider other motions.
Right, can I add some discussion to this motion?
Yes.
It's sort of swirling around. So as you were working your way toward this, and I think John was working toward it and then switched a little bit. So it got a little crazy. If it were the neighbors with the Conservation Committee, given that I believe the town has not instituted a ban on the 5 flammable trees, I think I could go with this, but I really want the neighbors to understand the risk that they're taking on and the risk they're putting their neighborhood at. And then I think we need to strongly encourage the town planning as we work our way through the safety element to basically put something in that says in the future that these trees have to come out, you know, by law, not by sort of discretionary decision. Because I worry
Greg,
about.
are you making a friendly amendment?
Well, let's see. We have a motion. We have a second. Yeah, I guess I'll make it as. Can I make that as a friendly amendment to what you have? That seems like it's turning back what John said. So I'm also willing to vote on the motion. I just wanted to add this to the discussion. So we can either vote on this one and then have another one, or we can do a friendly amendment.
So I don't know how to do this as a parliamentary matter. Chair,
Right.
if you know how to do this. I can simply withdraw I think I can withdraw at this point. Or else we can have a vote and I'll vote against it and allow you to restate the motion. I don't know how to unbox ourselves from where we are right here.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should vote on the motion. I think that's the easiest thing to do.
I think you should, that's my recommendation, is to vote on the motion. And then if you are reaching consensus a different way, have a new motion.
Okay, great. So I think we're ready to vote on this one.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and this is a roll call vote. Commissioner Tark,
No.
Commissioner Taylor,
Nay.
Commissioner Haskell,
Which one are we voting on? Tree removal or not? I'm
Tree
getting
removal.
confused.
tree removal.
This is tree removal.
No.
Vice Chair Goulden,
Aye.
Chair Koff-Still.
No.
Okay, so the motion fails. So then if someone wants to make an additional motion, now we've cleared the decks.
Okay, good.
Okay, so I'd like to make the motion that I thought Jonathan was almost going to make and then change, but I'm okay. I mean, I appreciate you sticking to the principle. I'm really trying to balance some interests here, and this is not easy. So I would accept everything from the previous motion except for the tree removal. And I would change that to the neighbors will consult with the Conservation Committee going forward. I mean, I think they need to understand the true risks to these trees. I mean, I get that they're causing shade, but there's other ways to put up shade structures. So I would hope that either the owner or the owner and the neighbor decide to take them out. I think they are a severe fire risk. But until the town has that as a regulation, it's harder for me to push on this. You know, I think that in the past we've always done these as recommendations until they're regulation, and it's a recommendation. And so I think we need to be careful that we don't turn this into a requirement.
Can I offer an idea? Is
Yes, please.
to also ask the neighbors to consult the Woodside Fire Protection District.
Certainly, yeah, I thank you. So basically in consultation with the Conservation Committee and the Woodside Fire Protection District.
Right.
Yeah,
But am
that's-
I right, the neighbors get to decide in the end, if they listen to those two groups and decide they still want the trees, we live with it.
Well, and let me be clear, the owner gets to decide at the end. It's not the neighbors. The neighbors don't
Yeah,
have
yeah.
any say in this. I totally appreciate that the owner is being neighborly and trying to work with his neighbors, but it is the owner's decision. And if that tree is dropping stuff or he feels it becomes too much of a fire risk for him, it's his decision. So just to be clear,
Good. I like that.
but yes, I think you got the principle right.
Okay,
So is that motion clear now? I know there's sort of some discussion in the end, but hopefully the motion was the first part of it.
yeah.
I'll second it.
Thank you, John.
Okay, any more discussion? We're ready for a vote.
The only comment I would make, and it's a comment, it's not for an amendment or anything, is that, you know, people have weighed in and there are going to be arborists engaged for the tree trimming. And I do believe these types of analyses would be brought to the forefront. So I'm not being, for the record, cavalier about the risk. I do trust the neighbors and the applicant to have self-interest in mind when they confer with experts and make their decision. That's just clarifying my view, but I would support that if the rest of the commissioners support that.
Great. So I think we're ready for a vote now. Laura?
Okay, Commissioner Tark,
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor,
Aye.
Commissioner Haskell,
Aye.
Vice Chair Goulden,
Aye.
Chair Koff-Still.
Aye.
So that motion passes.
Thank you
Good luck
all.
to the applicant and project team.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness on this thing. We'll look at the tree issue very carefully. There may be a factor that will have to be considered also, which is the ability to obtain insurance.
There you go, right, talk to insurance company too, that's a good one. Great, and everybody's welcome to stay. We have just a few more topics. One, I think, is reports from us commissioners, if anybody's been to other meetings. No commissioner reports, okay. Then last on our list are staff reports.
So one scheduling announcement, we have an appeal for 1195 Westridge from the ASCC approval. It was originally scheduled for tonight's meeting, but we had a lot of materials that we needed to put together to be able to evaluate that appeal. So that is right now scheduled, we think for August 3rd. We'll be confirming that tomorrow. So please keep that in mind. I sent you all an email kind of about the scheduling of some upcoming meetings. John Wallace, if you're still out there, please feel free to drop off. Thank you very much for coming. And then I wanted to give an update on the housing element process. I know that you've all been following this, but I just wanted to make sure that for the record, we're continuing to update the commission and the community. So the council reviewed the public review draft housing element on the 13th, and they made a couple of key decisions or provided key direction. So the first one is they formed a subcommittee of the mayor and the vice mayor, and they are working with us staff on finalizing the buffer numbers. The mayor had some ideas about how to approach the buffer, so we're looking at some of that. And then they were also looking at the Glen Oak site in response to a lot of people that were very interested in maintaining the equestrian business for both purposes of maintaining a local business and maintaining equestrian heritage in the community. So they asked us to follow up with the property owner of that site, which is Stanford, as well as the folks that run the stables and the riding academy. So we're pursuing that and looking to see if there's any additional options to maintain horse operations. So those meetings are ongoing, including staff and council members. Then in regards to the opt-in rezoning program, after a lot of discussion, they decided to maintain that program, but to limit it to projects of 4 units per site instead of 4 units per acre. And then capturing some of the planning commission's discussion around requiring a discretionary review process for people to be able to participate in that. So we're working with the subcommittee on some of those details as well. They supported the idea that came from the planning commission and was developed by this body related to the Gateway land use designation. Staff provided them some additional information and analysis to think about. We did present to them that we thought it may be possible to keep the 2 oak trees, the meadow directly in front of it, reconfigure the baseball diamond, and build an affordable housing project with underground parking, but the cost would be very high. So it assumes additional income from different sources or some type of fundraising to be able to do that. So what they decided to do was to take the first 2 years of the housing element cycle, probably not engage really in any planning in the first year, really emphasize the ADU production and the other programs in the first year. And then in the second year, go into a feasibility analysis of evaluating that site, thinking about how the open space could be maintained, what the options may be, whether fundraising would be viable, real feasibility analysis from an engineering, planning, and financial standpoint. So those things would likely take place in the second year of the housing element to start to see what the options are. There was a lot of concern amongst community members that the Ford Field baseball diamond itself would be removed and housing would be developed there. So I just want to confirm that, there was light discussion in this body about whether that was included in the proposal and what might happen. So council's feedback on that was that baseball diamond would remain, that there's not a proposal to remove the baseball diamond. So we wanted to keep saying that to folks who were very concerned. And then what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate that site kind of overall, because there's opportunity for improvement to the baseball facility in terms of the way that it's oriented, and it doesn't have permanent bathrooms and things like that right now. So staff is working with that subcommittee, and they directed staff to submit the housing element once we have made those revisions with the subcommittee. So we're working on that now, and we have got about another week to a little more than a week's worth of work to do to be able to put that together. Then we'll send it off to HCD. Woodside just sent their housing element off to HCD just ahead of us by about a week or so. So they'll be getting midway comments back, and then we'll be getting midway comments back. Once we've got the latest version of the draft housing element, we'll alert everyone through all of our e-notification systems and post it on the website so that everyone knows what we have submitted to HCD. And all of the public comments are available on the website, portolavalley.net/housing element. And then there's like all the expandable widgets, and there's one with all the public comments that we received during the 30-day public comment period. So hopefully you all had a chance to look at those. There's a couple of duplicates. Sorry, it's hard to compile hundreds of pages of comments, but that's where all of those things are. So we'll provide updates to everyone who's been asked to be notified and put it out in the town news. And then the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee took this month off because they've been working so hard, had a month off, and then we'll come back to start meeting with them in August. And we'll start laying the foundation for talking about the zoning code amendments that implement the housing element. So we can be preparing those while HCD is reviewing the draft. So we'll start to work on some of that to get ahead of that. So that's the general update, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions. And this is one, if there's any members of the public that wanted to provide any comments, we should do that as well.
Great. Do the commissioners have any questions or for Laura?
I got two quick questions. The subcommittee you referenced, this is a subcommittee of the town council that's working on the revisions for the draft? Yeah.
Yeah, the mayor and the vice mayor.
Yeah, great. And then was there any talk about and I'm going to put this in quotes, but a marketing plan for getting ADUs and JADUs, like get that started? Like that seems like that's something that, we could start moving on pretty quickly in terms of thinking about, what it might look like.
Well, there's a lot of best practices that are in the housing element in terms of when we're going to start them. There wasn't specific direction from the council about starting now. So certainly, you know what I mean, we would begin those things at the beginning of 2023. But right now, most of the resources are going in towards, moving the plan forward and working on the safety element. So the council did not direct us to start working on the ADU, like the new handouts and those materials right away.
Yeah, so it sounds like maybe we should lobby the town council to get some volunteer effort to start thinking about what a marketing campaign might look like. I mean, I guess I'm a little worried that, we're going to lose 6 months where, we don't start until 2023. We don't actually come up with a marketing plan until halfway or more through 2023. And part of what we're hoping is that we can use ADUs and JADUs to make a significant impact on some of the other things we're doing. So the longer we wait, the less we're going to be able to impact it. So, but that's not really to you. I mean, I guess it's a general planning commissioner comment, which I could take to the council at some point.
Yeah, it's probably best if you have those comments as individuals to provide those comments to the council. You're always welcome to do that. Their direction is to work with the subcommittee, wrap this piece up, and get it out to HCD so that we still got a little bit of time in the fall to do another round of revisions. So that is really where I understood their focus of their direction to be.
Yeah, and I want to be careful. I wasn't trying to put more work on you since I know, you get more than enough. So, but I do hope we can find a way to, get the outline of this marketing plan started.
Any other comments from commissioners?
I just had a quick question, Laura. So did I hear that we expect to get some preliminary comments back from HCD kind of halfway through, like in 90 days or something?
Yes, so Redwood City is the first city in our county to get comments back. So we're expecting, they just got their comments back 2 Fridays ago. So we're expecting it to follow that same model. So we have more information than what we had before. And they had a phone call at about the 60-day mark with HCD, and it was very detailed. And they went over very detailed comments. They had read everything. They had prepared most everything and went over a bunch of that with staff. And then at exactly 90 days, they got their formal letter. And what we learned is that a few of the things that they discussed in the phone call ended up being removed from the letter. So they were able to explain some of the things and have some of the comments taken off. And then they also told us that the phone call was actually more detailed than the letter. So I think a lot of the letters are using kind of form language, and a lot of the specifics are coming from the phone call. So that's really helpful to us because we'll be able to really focus and, have a good staff present at that phone call, get a lot of notes down and start working on some of their comments in advance. So really new information that we just got in the last week and a half or so.
Thank
So we'd expect the phone call in maybe 60 days after you send it off. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
End of September.
That
Okay.
about that time frame.
Great. Anything else from commissioners before I go to the public?
A quick question. So I know the ad hoc committee did, 10 times more than originally anticipated, but I'm not aware of the exact purview. And normally I would expect zoning questions to come to us. So what's the sequence on the zoning and what's the ad hoc committee's role and purview?
Their role on the zoning is quite a bit lighter than on the housing element. It's to take the concepts to them and to say, do these concepts reflect the discussion and what we built up into the draft housing element? So they're going to be, not as detailed as what you would normally review as the Planning Commission. And then we'll bring you those more detailed zoning code amendments for the Planning Commission to work on for an ultimate decision up to the council.
So for example, for opt-in, they might discuss the parameter. Like I just need an example to understand what their role is, because one comment that was made in our prior meeting was the ad hoc committee did all this work. We shouldn't be second guessing them. So I'm very focused on what's their purview and what are we going to be doing?
Great question. Some of it is going to be developed, but let me give you an example using the opt-in that you just had. So the council's direction was they wish to retain flexibility on the housing unit type. So to them, cottages, townhouses, multiple units within one building, all of those things were acceptable to them. They wanted flexibility because all of our sites are different. So we would take that concept and we'd go to the housing element committee and say, here's three graphics, ways to look at it. Do you have feedback on this? Do you have things in mind? And it would be sort of blocky and conceptual. And then we would take that recommendation and bring it to the Planning Commission for the fine tuning. The height is exactly 18 feet. The setback is exactly 30 feet. You know what I mean? The windows would or wouldn't be allowed in these places. So the real nuts and bolts would rest with the Planning Commission for the zoning code amendments.
But would they decide, just say the council had suggested 4 different sort of building types and they decided, we only want 3. would we end up 3 coming to the planning commission? Like,
No,
are they-
I would probably bring you 4 if that was using that example and say, the Housing Element Committee recommended these 3. But hey, Planning Commission, here's the range of things you can consider.
Okay,
We're not gonna, we spent, as you know, many months and many hours trying to educate the Housing Element Committee on all of the nuances.
Right.
We're not gonna do all those months of work to educate them on the nuance of zoning. That rests with the Planning Commission, you know what I mean, in terms of the knowledge base you already have. So it's gonna be conceptual recommendations from them and more detailed, construction of the zoning with you.
And sort of following on that same vein, the zoning that we will be attempting to do is what is supporting the plan that we've turned into HCD, such that simultaneously in January, when HCD finally approves it, if they do, we match that. Right?
Yes.
So even if there's still some open questions about or ideas that we might do something else, we have to put in place the zoning that supports the plan as is at that point in time. Yes. Okay.
Yes. So that's why that phone call at 60 days is going to be really important to make sure we're on the right track. So the council knows that there might be a little bit of doubling back or a little bit of duplicating work, but we're going to try to avoid that as much as possible with the timing, so that we can line up everything to be able to adopt everything together. That's the goal.
Oh, go ahead.
I might be misremembering, but I thought that had been a question by Sarah Wernikoff, maybe, about when you have to lock in the zoning versus the document submitted and hopefully approved by HCD. What you're saying is they have to come, they must come together. You don't have any lag time where you can update the zoning afterward. Like, maybe I'm not understanding.
It's very tricky. So the law allows us to do the zoning after the housing element, but they don't like that. And so the law is more restrictive if we do it that way and takes away some of our local control. And so that's the issue that we explained to council, and they said, no, we want to keep that local control because it's meaningful to us.
Okay.
Because it's related to density and processing. So
Okay.
that's why we want to adopt the zoning by January of 2023. Then ideally, then the whole package is together. The housing element, the zoning, and the environmental review is all together. So we're going to have to work with the lawyers, depending on how the timing goes, at the last minute to figure out the best course of action. And a few people will be ahead of us, and we'll be drawing from the best practices from other places to figure out exactly how to do that.
I mean, I guess the one thing that's obvious to me is Ford Field, if we have a sunrise provision and we're lagging by a year and then we figure out something else, we've already locked the zoning in at that point, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we will have created a general plan land use classification that allows open space, recreation, and affordable housing.
Okay.
We own the property, so even if we rezone it, we don't have to build it if we
Okay,
came up
got
with
it.
an alternative solution.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Cara and I are working on the details right now, but we're keeping that in mind.
And Laura, the bulk of the zoning, we have this opt-in that would be 4 units per site, not per acre, so that's interesting. We've got some that Glen Oaks, if it's zoned, would be, I think, 6 units per acre. And then a few sites that are 20 units per acre. We would need new zoning rules that cover those 3 things, which are brand new for the town of Portola Valley. They'd each need their own height and setbacks and blockiness. Yeah, okay, so those are the 3 big projects, let me call it.
Yes, so this big next phase of zoning will be, it will lay out all of the basics of the new zoning districts. Setback, height, floor area. It'll include all those basic components that you're familiar with. Then depending on how that goes, we might do, and that needs to be finished by January. But because of time, we might separate out like the finest details of the objective standards. And then do that after January, but still early in 2023. So we would have set the most basic aspects of the building envelope by January, but we might come back and be very particular in objective standards on roof forms, lighting, building articulation, some of those fine points. So we might have to have a phase 3 for zoning.
No, thanks for all
If I
that.
can, yeah, first, thank you very much. And needless to say, I appreciate planning staff and councils taking the time to actually listen to this body and to incorporate some of the issues that were identified and brought forward at the kind of 10th hour. I have a handful of questions. On Ford Field, the recommendation that at least those put forward in the your colleague's letter was that there would be a maximum number of units on the Ford Field area, I guess the park area itself, in addition to having a zone. Did that make it in? Or is it simply a 20 dwelling units per acre for the full 7+ acres? I think that I may have missed that.
So we have to finalize how we're going to write it. My understanding of their direction was that would be the 50 units max. It would not be 20 units per acre for that whole property.
Yeah,
So
no,
it would
that
be
was
the
very
50
exciting.
units max.
Great. There's also a question about consistency with the general plan as well. It's like there are maybe 5 sections or 5 elements that are at play, at least in the GP, probably more than that. Would those also be put forward and an effort made to bring vertical consistency, I guess is the term, by January as well?
Yes, that's our intent. And so it would start with what we brought to council was that we would do a technical review by our technical team, consultant planners, legal folks, my staff. So we do a technical review first, and then we would convene the committee of committees, which has been very effective in this process so far to give feedback on what we've identified. And then that would come to this body and then ultimately to council.
Got it. So we would end up having before this body a revision to the general plan, a zoning code modification. Presumably, we're also going to see a mitigated negative declaration, CEQA document come to this body as well.
Yes.
And someplace in here, we're going to have a crosswalk with fire safety issues.
Yes.
Presumably.
The Woodside Fire Protection District is working on what consultants they're going to use to do their mapping work and their hazard and risk assessment. So they're working on that step right now, trying to expedite that and get it going as quickly as possible. So, we originally hoped to have those materials by October. They're going to try to produce preliminary products as early as they can, and they'll expect to have all of it probably about the end of this calendar year. So we're going to be coordinating with them, and we're going to have to see what the results are of that analysis. And we've got certain things already built in to the housing element, the way that it's drafted. So We'll look at their mapping. We'll see if there's any issues that have come up with any of the sites that we've already identified for housing sites. And then we'll look at ADU and SB9 policies to see if any of those need to be amended. We'll look at the setbacks that we have drafted to see if any of those need to be amended so that we can do any final revisions for the final package. But we'll be in close communication with the fire district. And I've given them a preview of the issues that we have coming up in we meet typically every other week. Jeremy and I meet with the fire chief and the fire marshal approximately every other week.
Great.
Well,
thank you.
that is going to be a big piece of work, and with information coming in from all sides and maybe behind. Buckle up and we'll go from there.
So if I might, in recognition of the amount of work coming this way, if I could echo Judith's comment on more clarification on our various roles as we jump into these topics would be really helpful so that we're all on the same page, knowing what we're trying to accomplish by when. That would be really helpful. So
that's great feedback. Thank you. I can completely appreciate that. And I'll be working on that and keeping it in mind. And I will try to frame future updates and when we get to staff reports and everything to try to make those roles clear.
Thank you.
Very good. Good. Let me move. I see one hand up from the public. Let me go take that. I think that's you, Caroline, phone number 7562.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm a little confused with all these comments. My hand has been up a long time. So let me first give you the good news. I appreciate that you recognize that people in Portola Valley, they usually work this out among neighbors. Fortunately, several things have changed in this town, and I'm not going into details. But I think one of the things that happened tonight is I think there was a link missing in the process with this previous project. Usually when committee members discuss the item, and I'm thinking about the one on Mr. LaCruz's case, usually you go to public before you vote a motion. And I think you passed that. If I may address some issues, I want to make sure that there is a fair assessment. I have seen several projects going up, and it's not by mistake or by coincidence that I brought up Grove. Several projects there that have gone up, and I'm really questioning why suddenly you make the change where perhaps that should have occurred earlier. I'm really, my open comments that I was not able to place this morning, or I'm sorry, earlier in oral communication is, I have a lot of concerns about the approvals that you made for 77 Palmer Lane and the consequences that we continue to suffer, partially because the town staff does not want to help us with cold water. And there's several issues there going on, which, yes, I forget what you call it, the soil. I have not raised the complaint because they will be my neighbors, but I know other people in town have raised complaints. All the trucks that are lined up on Saucil and excavated the dirt there on 77. It's a real disaster for our town, what has been removed for vegetation. My letter that I submitted this morning was also concerned that if we continue to actually evaluate the pattern, when we moved in 94, we came out of a drought over 10 years. And so I have mentioned it before, when you live on Sandrock and you have had a drought, the soil cannot absorb all the rains. And I anticipate that, and hopefully we will get a lot of rain patterns in the next coming years. And I hope the town will be prepared for it. But just like with the safety, fire safety, they have neglected every concern that we have raised. So that's it for now. I'm very disappointed to find the process again, that we will hear this, the fire safety or the report from the fire district at the end of the year. Just last week, we were told that Peers and Peers will present an evacuation and safety, fire safety report on August 10th. Every meeting we attend, we have different information. I'm not used to that in the town of Portola Valley, and I really thank you for all your patience and for your encouragement and for supporting this community. And I hope you will continue it. It's sad what we're going through, but thank you very much for your time and effort. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. And sorry if there was confusion on the public comments tonight. Our process is intended to be the same. I asked for comments and waited a little bit, but we have very few attendees. So, maybe the window seems short. I'll, in this case, in the future, I'll really shout out when we're at the public comment time to make sure everybody knows. Laura, did you want to say anything about, I feel like there is some confusion about the evacuation plan versus the fire department work.
Yeah, thank you. The town has its own evacuation study that's being led by Jeremy, that's being done by Fair and Peers, and that is going forward to council. And I believe August 10th is the correct day for that. That's a separate piece of work, though it is coordinated, but it's separate than what the fire district is doing. They're doing a hazard risk assessment for all of their areas. And then they're doing fire mapping with vegetation and as I understand it, also building fuels. So that's a mapping exercise that they're going to be working on with a consultant separate from our evacuation study.
Great, thank you. Good, I think that's the end of our topics. So I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Good night.
Laura.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Craig.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.